Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part 5 of the Trumpeter 1/35 scale Tiger 1 late version with Zimmerit. Okay, so this is part 5, and oddly enough we're starting on step 5, which is kind of crazy. So to get started, I'm going to do these sub-assemblies here of the mufflers and the armored exhaust covers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the parts off, and like I always do on my videos, I will demonstrate the first couple of items that I'm cutting off and cleaning up, and then after that I will do it off camera just to save some time. So first I need B21 and B22. Just taking my handy Tamiya cutter, cut it away from the sprue a little bit here. There, and there. And then I will, okay, so this has the kind of sprue gates that are on the mating surface or the gluing surface of the part. So instead of protruding off the side and having to cut it off like this and then shape it and smooth everything, you can actually just layer cutter across like that and cut it, and it will cut the majority of it off. It may leave like just a little bit of sliver like that, but that's real easy to remove, and it saves marring the edge of the part. Now in this case it's not really that big a deal, because when I glue them together it's going to leave a seam, and I'm going to be sanding it off, so not that big a deal, but it is a cool feature, especially for some parts. So that's just something to watch for. Makes them clean them up a little bit easier. Now I could cut it off and clean it this way, but then I'm going to have to also do it this way, so I might as well just save myself a step and do that. Alright, so we got that and that. Same thing on this part here, and this part here. Okay, so let's test fit them. Now on this, it'd be hard to get them mixed up because there's 2 pins and 2 holes here, 1 on the bottom. So it goes together like that. Let me zoom in. Forgot to do that. So once again, 2 pins, 2 holes, 1 hole, 1 pin. So it'd be kind of tough to get them mixed up. So I'm going to put it together like this. Then I'm using my Tamiya extra thin. You might be able to hear my cat meowing in the background. She wanted in the room. Yes, she did. So the way I'm going to do it is like this. Let it run down the seam lines. The cement will be drawn down inside, so it'll give us a good joint. Touch it to the seam there and there. Now I'm going to smash them together. And the nice thing about Tamiya extra thin is whenever you squeeze it together, it will squish out just a little bit of molten plastic, melted dissolved plastic from the dissolving action of the cement. So it'll give you some, it'll give you a nice edge to clean up. So we got that. So let's let that dry. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. Okay, well, I've got those clamped in some clothespins here. So while those are drying, I'm going to go ahead and do both of the B7s and B8s here. Just get that clipped off, and I'll have to sand it a little bit, which I'll demonstrate. So I'll probably use my 600 here and just lightly sand that just to make sure. It's nice and smooth on that edge. Now there's a bit of flash right here on these rods or stems, pipes, whatever you want to call them. So I'm going to trim that off. See if there's any more. A little bit there. A little bit there. Seems like a weird place for flash, but and then get those edges sanded. Now, this is a part. This part goes inside of here. Now, you know, if that were exposed, you'd probably want to do something about those seams. But since they are covered, there is no need to mess with it. And those fit in there just like, it's kind of a keyhole situation. There is a keyhole and then corresponding tab inside of there, and it just pops right into place like that. So then I'll use my Tamiya extra thin, and I'm going to wait to glue this other part on the top that I was just cleaning the flash off, because I want to I don't want to take a chance of breaking anything off while I'm cleaning up these seams. So I'll be putting these on later. Okay, while those exhausts are drying, I am going to start working on this rear plate H13. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off of here. Like that. And get it cleaned up. Like that. So that's all nice and smooth. Then I need to look into the Zimmerit. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is cut this out. So the way I do it, and there may be 100 different ways to do it, but I take my straight edge and I don't cut it exactly where it's supposed to be. I cut it really close, but I don't want to take off too much. So I put it just a little bit up. It's super thin, so it cuts really easily. And then once I have the whole thing cut out, I can lightly sand that edge. So I just need to continue on around. Like this. Then once I have it cut out, I carefully use my sander to make sure those edges are flush. You can feel if they're not. So I'll just go all the way around. So now that I've got it cut out, I'm going to make a template to cut out for this piece right here. So I'm just going to use a piece of paper, trace around the edge, of the this hole here. And I think I'll go ahead and do this part here just so I have more points of reference to kind of steady the template once it's in place. So now I'm going to cut this out. All right, so there we go. The template thing, after I started working on it, ain't gonna work. It'd have been more trouble than just trying to freehand it, which is what I ended up doing. So I just used my handy dandy X-Acto knife, and boom. Pretty good. Not quite as tight as all the molded in stuff, but it will work. So now I gotta do is just glue this stuff on, and I'm going to do it the same way I did it the last time. Got my Tamiya extra thin and my Tamiya or Tester's Model Master liquid cement for plastic models, which is thicker stuff. And I am just going to apply cement where it goes. So it goes in here. But first, I want to check something. So one thing I need to figure out here is the jack goes here, and the toe hooks go here, and that's underneath the Zimmerant. Thusly, oops. So for these over here, the holes for the S hooks, that's no big deal, because once this is glued into place and it's nice and solid, I can drill in from the back, and so I can mount the hooks. On this side here, they are square holes. So I would either need to punch through all the way on that and drill it through from the back, or I can cut off the locating pins of the parts that are to be glued there and just do it that way. You know, actually I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a drill bit, small one, a little bit smaller than those square holes, and I am going to drill a hole through this. That way, once the part is in place, I can drill back through, and then using my knife I can square those holes off, because I want those parts to be real solid in there. I don't want them to be floppy, because when I start weathering stuff, I don't want stuff to start breaking off. So let's see what bit I'm going to use. I'm using my awesome Micromark carbide drill bit set metric. So let's see. I could get as close as possible, so let's check the 1.5. That's a little bit big, so let's go with the 1.0, and then I will just center it the best I can and drill through just like that, no problem. Alright, so I got those holes punched and ready to go. So I'm going to glue this on here, and I'm going to get some glue close to these holes because I want to make sure they're nice and solid whenever I try and drill through the other side. Of course, you know, it's not going to be that big of an issue because Zimmerit is super thin and easy to manipulate. That's manipulate in some weird language. So put some of this here. Let's put a little there. And I am going to go through with extra thin around the edges. So let's do that. And now let's stick it in place. Now the nice thing is these things fit really, really, really good. So they fit through around all these details really tightly. So lining them up on these parts isn't really that big of an issue. All right, so let's get my clamps and clamp them thusly. Actually, before I clamp them, I'm going to run my extra thin around the edges just to make sure they're all nice and tight. I'll do one side at a time, that way I can make sure everything is snug as the proverbial bug in a rug. Little poetry. All right, so let's clamp that down like that. And then these down here, I'll use these. Okay, and then let's do this other side here. This is probably overkill, but you know, I just want to make sure that nothing lifts off later. Let's clamp this. And this. Again, it's probably overkill. Over my dead body. Who knows what that was? Okay, so there we go. All right, so let's let that dry really well. And then in the meantime, I'll cut out the little piece that goes here and get that glued into place as well. Okay, so these parts are all glued on. They dried overnight. So now I've chosen an appropriate size bit and it is working nicely. Just a matter of running it through, getting the burr off. So now I have the holes I need to glue the parts on. In this case, the hooks. So we got that one. Then we have this real tiny hole here. Like that. So we're good to go with those. So that's a good way to be able to line up the tools precisely. You don't have to worry about, you know, it being off center a little bit, looking good until you get it glued on there and start looking at it later and discover that it's, you know, kind of crooked. So let me work on one of these square holes here and I'll get back with you on that. Okay, so next thing I want to do is I want to sand these edges flush just like I did on the hull. That way it doesn't look like a flat piece of something on the tail plate. Just like that. And then I'll run my to me extra thin along there just to smooth it out. Alright, so now that I've got the what you call zimmered on this back plate, I can start gluing these parts on. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these together first. And the way I'm going to do that, make sure it's fitting in there right. There's a little bit more flash on the bottom here, so I need to trim that off. I missed it. Okay, so let's put this on here, hopefully. Okay, and then I'll just glue it all around. Make sure it's pressed down because it's got to fit down in those holes so it'll be somewhat level. Like that. Alright, while those are drying, I am going to go ahead and cut off the parts for the hooks. So I need B2 and 2 B11s. So let's find B2. And 2 B11s. I'll have to be real careful because these are pretty small parts. And that's another area where nice sharp cutters come in handy because it doesn't overly stress the plastic when you're cutting it so parts don't break as easily. Okay, so I got the C-hook or tow hook, whatever you want to call it, that's in place. So the next part I want to do, I think, so it can be drying while I'm doing the other stuff, is put this jack together. So I'm going to cut all these parts off, get them cleaned up, and then we'll put it together. Alright, so I've got the parts cut off and cleaned up, so let us put it together. Okay, this is kind of cool. I like the way they did this. There's two little tabs here that fit around this cross piece here, and then this one here keeps it centered there, and then this one lines up inside of there. So that is pretty dandy in helping keep it lined up and true. So I'll do the same thing. I'll apply my cement inside like that. That way doesn't mar the outside too much. And just put it like that and that. Alright, so those two are together. So let's put this one on here. Okay, I think for that one I'm going to use this cement here. this largish piece here. Slides right there. Flip that over. Whoa. Like that. Push it in place. Flip that around, and then this little teeny tiny piece right here goes on the end of this. So use a little bit of this cement. Like that. So I'm going to let that dry before I work on the handle part. Okay, so those holes that I drilled out, I made them more square and started putting these brackets in. I'm going to let those dry really good before I actually put the jack. But in the meantime, let me show you what I did here with the jack. So back on the plate here, it doesn't come with the kit, but in photos I've seen of build kits and of Tiger rear hull plates, there is a clamp, like one of your typical German tool clamps, that hold this handle up against the hull, I guess, so it's not just swinging around. So I didn't have any of just those, but I did have some tools with some tool clamps on them. So I got one out, I cut the tool off, got the clamp, and cut the tool off, and drilled that hole right there. So that will fit on there, and the handle will fit right through that hole. So once it dries up, I can show you how it's going to install on there. So I went ahead off camera because I had to get it out of frame to do it. I've got the jack and the brackets press fit into place. So now I just need to glue the brackets. And then once that dries, then I can do the handle. So my cutting the square holes into the Zimmerit worked. So that is one way to approach it. Then just glue them in place. I'll let those solidify a bit, and then we'll work on the handle. All right, so now I need to glue this handle onto the lever part of this jack. So let's see how that fits first. Oh, that's a nice snug fit, so that's cool. Make it easier to put together. So I'm gonna glue that like that. Make sure it's 90 degrees there. Let that dry for a second. Now, while that's drying, I'm waiting so I can put it together. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off H3 next, which is if I'm not mistaken, that's the plate that's used to assist in hand cranking the engine. If you know for sure, put it in the comment section down below, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. All right, so there's a couple of posts here with holes, and there are a couple of pins here. So just put that in place like that. Hold it flat. and glue that thusly. Hope it doesn't stick to my finger. Okay, so let that dry. Now I'm going to cut off. I'm going to do these parts B4 with B25s on each side. Okay, one thing to note on these armored exhaust covers, I sanded on the ends because you know, there's a little bit of irregularity from the molding process. Not really flash, but it's, you know, kind of a little lip kind of thing going around, which was super easy. I mean, it was no big deal. But on the inside, there are some of these weird half circle shaped ejector pins, remnants. So to get those, I'm just using a screwdriver. They're really easy to break off, and it won't damage the part. And because of the location of where they are, there's a little bit left. There's no way that you're ever going to see in there, so there's no need to clean them off, okay? But you do need to remove those kind of pin looking things. So that is what I'm doing. Quite simple. Whoa. Just make sure you're wearing safety goggles. All right, then I need to glue these little pieces here, which I think, I don't know what they're for, but I would assume, depending on their location, considering that these parts right here on the real deal were cast, these are probably heavy, so they probably had to hoist them out of the way with these pins, or whatever you want to call them. You know, again, I don't know for sure, but whoops, that's what I'm thinking. Nice thing is, oh man, if I can just get it into position here, they're a nice snug fit. Well, that one's not going to be. All the rest of them were nice and snug. This one's not going to be. I always regret it when I say stuff. These are really small. Okay, this is getting comical here. There we go. Let's make sure it's pushed all the way back and firmly in place. Now I'm going to take my Tamiya cement, put a good blob of it in there, let it soften that plastic a little bit. And then, using my tweezers, really pushing into place. Now there's a little bit of mold seam line, but I left it on there because I'm going to have to do a little bit of sanding on this anyway to kind of get it blended in, and then I'll have to use some Mr. Surfacer 500 or something to kind of replace the cast texture. But there's that, so we'll let that dry. So now I'm gonna cut off parts A18 and A19 and get those ready, and hopefully this stuff will all be dried by that time, and I can start putting it on that rear plate of the hull. Okay, so I got all the parts cleaned up. Now these here, I'm actually going to install them later in the build after I paint the base coat of Dunkelgelb, because I want to make sure everything inside gets painted. What I'm probably going to do, and whether or not it's like totally accurate, you know, totally right, but it kind of makes sense, is whenever I prime it, and I prime it in the oxide primer, I'm going to paint the insides of these with the oxide primer, but I'm not going to paint them. I'll just paint the outside part of it, because you know, you will be able to see a little bit of it. So with that, I can now, I think I'll try and do this handle next. So what I need to do is I need to put this on here, and then I also need to put on my awesome little clamp here. So I can put that there, then I can put it in place, get it snugged up against, and then I can glue that last. So I'm going to check my reference and make sure I've got the little release handle on the correct side. Okay, so from the sources I've seen online, this little release should be on this side. So I'll turn that like that. Now, all I have to do is carefully, whoops, this right here. So what I'll do is I'll put it in place like this. It's not quite straight, but I just need to tack it with some glue. All right, so it's lined up. So now I just gotta put a little bit of cement on there. Okay, and then push it up just a little bit. And then let me make sure it's all straight first. All right, so now I think this should be a little bit lower. So let's do some surgery here. That, and then take the cement and boom, just like that. All right, so let's let that dry. All right, so here's something else I'm doing on here. Now, as you can see, this is dulled up. I'm going to add a little, since these were sheet metal, and you know, being in the back of the vehicle, I could see them getting bumped into and backed into things, and there's tons of photographic evidence showing that these things got frequently messed up. So all I did was using my knife. There's a million ways to do this, but this is the way I'm doing it. Just carving out a bit. Here, let me demonstrate on this one here. I'm going to put one right in the middle right here, and I'm just going to carefully, now, safety tip of the day. Notice how I've got my thumbs together right here. That's to keep me from slipping. If the knife were to slip, it's not going to go flying into my thumb. Okay, I'm all about safety first. Better safe than sorry. You know, all those cliche things. Okay. So I'm just going to carve that. Don't want to go too deep because I don't want to go all the way through. But got a nice big chunk there. And then using this, a very spongy sanding stick, I'm just going to rub it like that. You can use steel wool. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. Just to smooth out any cut marks. And boom, you have a nice little dent there. Okay, if it looks a little too harsh, I can just scrape it down a little bit with the edge of my blade. further burnish it down like that. And once you get paint and stuff like that on there, it'll look like a nice, nice smashed in dent. So added a couple of those, just to add a little bit of interest to the rear end of the vehicle. Okay, so what I'm going to use for this is Mr. Surfacer 1000. I can't show you the label because I'm already stirring it up, but it's just like a really thick lacquer-based surface primer. So it'll eat into the plastic really good and allow me to make some texture. I've done it before, quite a few times actually. And I figure now would be a good time to do it too. So I'll show you how I'm going to do it. Using this extremely cheap but extremely effective brush. You can find these in the big hobby shops. Oddly enough, it's made in the USA. Got nylon bristles. They're not good for much except for a whole lot, if that makes sense. But they're really good for doing stuff like this. Because if you screw it up, it's no big deal, but I've yet to screw one up. So I'm going to put some on here like this. I'm going to kind of put it evenly all on this surface here. And part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it start solidifying a little bit. Then I'm going to come back and really stipple it to give it the texture. It's a very common method. Lots of people use this. And it really seems to work well. The nice thing is if you get a texture that's a little bit too rough or chunky looking, you can smooth it out with some lacquer thinner. You can knock it back a little bit with some abrasive of some type, like sandpaper, sanding stick, whatever. And it really a good thing to have on hand. Okay, so now I'm just gonna stipple it up a little bit, kind of blend it in with the original texture. See, really helps hide the part that was glued on. It kind of gives the texture some uniformity. That's all there is to it. So with that, I am going to work on the other one. Then once that's done, all you got to do is clean your old brush in some lacquer thinner. You're good to go. Tell you what, these brushes, cheap, effective, multi-use tool. Okay, while those armored covers are drying, I'm going to go ahead and glue these exhausts into place. And I am going to use my thicker cement here, and then I'll add some more of the Tamiya extra thin. This is just mainly to tack it into place. So I want to make sure these are sitting in here correctly, because it would be easy to rest the muffler up against that back plate when that would not be correct, because they stand out a little bit from there. Just gonna make sure they're vertically oriented like that. Just kind of drop this into place and make sure they're kind of centered up. looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to let those dry. And then we'll come back and add those armored covers. And we'll be getting near the end of this, this step number 5. All right, so now I'm going to put these armored covers on. Like thusly. And glue them in place. Now, one thing that's kind of crazy when you think about it is these are going to be covered up with these shrouds after I did all that groovy. Work on the armored covers. But you know what? That's okay. Yep, so that'll be on there like that. So again, I'm going to leave those off. I'll just glue these on with the Plate Extra Thin. Like that. And be careful, because this is pretty precision, this here Zimmerit. So you got to make sure those are actually bottomed out, those armored covers. All right, so there is the tail piece, the tail plate. Step 5 done. All right, so now I need to glue this rear plate onto the vehicle, and it looks like the way it's set up here is this plate here fits in this groove right here, and then these rest up against here in all a nice little snug fashion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this bottom part first, which will be along here, here, and here. And I'm going to let that set up so it's nice and sturdy. And then I'll work on the sides, because I want to make sure everything is real tight and real aligned properly. So let us begin. That, like that. There. And there. Okay. And then just push on the bottom and kind of pull down at the same time, and just make sure it's bottomed out on the, make sure these are aligned along the bottom here, and set it aside and let it cure up for a bit. Okay, so this part here, I've got a piece of tape on here because I wanted to pull these parts up and together to make sure they line up with the back of the sponsons, and that these line up here, because there's a little bit of a lip if you're not careful, and if you end up with that, then it could throw your vehicle off as far as the alignment. So for this, I'm going to be using my Plate Extra Thin quick setting, because I want it to set up really quick. Hence quick setting. So first thing I'm going to do is put some right up here, You might not be able to see it because of the angle. And squeeze it together thusly and hold it. And the same thing on this side. And this side I'm going to have to apply a little bit of upward pressure on it because I want that to line up. So and then once all that kind of gets set, then what I'm going to do is make sure these this little bit of Zimmerit is pressed down. All right, the back plate is glued into position, and I got the Zimmerit as lined up as I could, so we'll see how that works. I went ahead and took care of that little edge on the Zimmerit, and what I used was Vallejo's 100% acrylic resin plastic putty, and I just put a little bit on the edge there and just wiped it off, so whenever I paint it, prime it and paint it, it should be virtually invisible. So there's that. So now I need to, that finishes up part 5. So now I put the back plate on, which is the first part of part 6, and then I need to assemble parts C16 and 17, which is, whoa, the toe point. Sorry, had to drop in visitor. So with them put back where they belong, just trying to hog some screen time, I am going to do C16 and C17. Which is right here. All right, so let's see, let's glue it together. Like that. Let it dry, and in the meantime, cut off 2 B6s, which are these toe clevises here, C20 and A8. So let's start with B6. Oh, let's do C20. B6, 2, and only need 2. I'll leave those there. And then we need A8. Which is right here. And get these cleaned up. All right, all those parts are, excuse me, cleaned up. So now I can put them where they go. Whoops. Like like that. So we got that one. And then we've got this one here, which I believe is supposed to be the formation light or whatever they call it. So I'll have to remember to paint that later. In the appropriate color. Whoa. Those usually come as clear parts, but not in this kit, which is fine because, like I said, it's got to be painted. So let's glue that. And then down here where there's some holes I forgot to drill, which I can drill right now for this tool right here. There's a couple holes that need to be there, but I need to drill them from the inside, which I, just like I did with the other ones. Let me see if I can get it around here so you can see what I'm doing. Like that. And like that. All right. And kind of trim off any protruding plastic, and then put this in place. And the release handles, or whatever you want to call them, look like they should be facing down. So according to the illustration, so that's what I'm going to do. Get those in place there. Let's see, I think I'll put the cement from the inside. Like that. And that. And I think I'll do those last, because right now I need to cut this part of the Zimmerit. So, just like I've done the other parts, I will use a straight edge. Get it up there somewhat close, but enough where I can trim it, and then carefully cut it like that. And whoops, like that. Now I can just sand down those edges a little bit. Ready to put that on there. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other Zimmerit. I'll use this cement for the majority of it, and then use extra thin around the edges. And make sure that it's straight. There's nothing worse than crooked Zimmerit. Just a sloppy workmanship. And then some extra thin around the edges. These edges won't even be seen behind the idler, but hurts to be careful. This will be seen, so I'm going to have to make sure I get that press fit really well. Like that. Okay, and with that in place, then it is time to glue these on. I don't think they necessarily have to be glued on, but I glue them on because I don't like for them to pop off. And I like it when they're loose enough because it makes them hang naturally. So to look right. There. Can't see what I'm doing because the angle of this back plate, but I'll show you here in a sec. There, just like that. All right, so that concludes step number 6. So with the conclusion of step 6, I am going to end video part number 5 and come back next time, whereupon I'll be making some modifications to the fenders since it's going to be in travel track or transportation track mode. So that will be that. So thanks for joining me here on part number 5 of the Trumpeter 1/35 scale Tiger 1 late version. As always, if you have any hints, tips, questions, any pertinent information that might be helpful or maybe even not helpful, please leave it in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So until next time, thanks for watching and I will see you all later.